Hello, I'm the Grub Street Lodger, and welcome back on a gloriously sunny 1st of May. And April's been a great month. It's been sunny, and that's been quite lovely. I've really enjoyed that. I've had my 2 weeks off for Easter, and I've been working on a little project. And that project has been my garden. Now, this is how the garden looked in the advert for the house. And to be honest, it looked even worse once I moved in, because weeds had grown up through all the cracks in that pavement. And the stones, they're sitting on a plastic sheet with holes in, and weeds had grown up through that, and it was just generally pretty horrible. So the aim for the Easter was, how do we make it as nice as possible for as little money as possible? So a lot of stuff got reused. This plan was largely sort of drawn up by my dad, I suppose. He was the mastermind. I did a lot of the digging, and my mum was very good at raking, so good. Thank you for the help there. So what we did was we moved the plastic onto the, trimmed all the weeds of the cracked pavement, moved the plastic on there, then the stones on there, so it looked like a sort of gravel path. It's a sort of faux gravel path, but there we got mud, compacted mud that hasn't seen the sun for who knows how long. So I had to dig that up and whooshy that up, using some old bricks that were just sort of sitting in the shed thing. Built a bin bay to get them off the path so that I could walk down to the gate from there, and then ordered turf. And I was a bit worried about this turf. This was the key expense of the gardening, and it came, and it was all in these rolls, and I'd done a lot to try and level it and get as many stones out as possible, but was it going to work? So I unrolled this turf, and it looked kind of patchy, a little bit odd, and I had to water it. And this is where the beautiful sunshine was not handy, because it hasn't rained, and so I had to water it 2 or 3 times every day. Water. And one of the books I read quite a lot whilst watering, and we'll come to that. And now it's lush, so lush I can lay on it like this. Oh, I do like that grass. Then there's also the issue of the sheddy thing at the back. We think it's probably mainly asbestos. It's sort of cobbled together from old doors and bits and bobs, and to make it look a little more jolly, I painted it green. But I couldn't paint the window because there's some little like mesh. I didn't want to unscrew the boards because I'm not sure I could screw them back in again if they'd hold or whatever. So I got a spray can of pink paint, which I had already for another thing I did, and I sprayed it pink. So now I have a pink and green shed. Other plans will be to sort of whiten the walls, and get some bedding plants in and things like that. But that's going to be for half term, when I've built up just a little bit more money to buy these plants with and things like that. So now I have a lovely garden, and it is lovely. It's really nice. I've sat out in it a couple of times. I'm going to sit out in it today. I was going to make this video there, but there are other people enjoying their gardens, and I'd feel a bit self-conscious about talking about books with some weird setup with my laptop perched on a stepladder or whatever to try and make them. So I decided against that. But there, a gorgeous garden. That's been one of the main projects of April, and it's been really satisfying. And it's hopefully, so far, the grass has taken very well, and I hope it keeps there, and I'll have a garden sitting in the summer, which, God, who'd have thought that like 3-4 years ago, in my little London bedsit, or COVID, 6 years ago, when I was moved on from sitting in the middle of a big park by a policeman on a horse. I've got my own little garden. Roll on next COVID, maybe, then I can... No. We won't even joke about that. The other thing is I'm in another play, which is always good. This time I'm not a main part. I didn't want to be in a main part. I'm in a very small part. The play is The Unfriend. I'll talk about the script a little later. And in The Unfriend, I am the part of PC Junkin, if you know the play. Essentially, I come on right at the end. I hopefully cause hilarity, and then the play ends. So you get a nice fresh memory of me, hopefully. The first read-through is on Monday, but because it's such a small part, I'm not needed for the regular rehearsals for a bit. So it's hopefully going to be the enjoyment of a play without just constant doing of it, I hope. and the cast seemed really fun, and it's going to be good. Now, April. I had one sort of key book I wanted to read in April, and then other than that, I was kind of easy peasy. So the first book was not the key book. It was, wasn't that? Got the wrong way round. It was Merlin by Robert Nye. Now, a while ago, I read Robert Nye's Falstaff. I loved it. He gets described as Rabelaisian, and Falstaff is the Rabelaisian book, because to me the message of Pantagruel and Gargantua is bigness, magnanimity, be big, say yes to life, and Falstaff did that. Merlin's very different. It's a very different book. It's sparse, it's thinner, but the sentences are shorter. It's not about bigness, and in that case I don't think it is Rabelaisian. The central sort of conceit of it is, so Merlin's a weird figure in mythology, because he seems to be some kind of pagan holdover that's gone into the Christian Arthur myth, and so Christian writers have had to sort of work out what they're going to do with him. And one of the traditions is that Merlin is essentially a failed antichrist, like in Good Omens. He's an antichrist who is baptized so quickly that he has the antichrist powers but not the antichrist desires. And so that's what it goes with. And so the first half of it is actually more about Merlin's conception, and a lot of this book takes place in hell, where the devil and his two generals, Beelzebub and Astaroth, I think it was, are really enjoyably conceived. And actually the very first bit in the book is the harrowing of hell, but it's not a harrowing, it's a dance party in which Jesus is represented by a small monkey and the Virgin Mary is a sexy woman with wine, but she leads all the souls out of hell in a big sort of conga line. And so he's like, right, I'm going to get an antichrist. And so he does. And some of it's very funny. There's some possession bits where they possess various people. They possess a monk. And so now the monk is confessing the virgin, the pregnant virgin who's going to give birth to this antichrist, and saying things like, did you have sex with the devil? Does he have hairy balls? How hairy are his balls? I hear his balls are very hairy. All this kind of stuff. And then Merlin is born, and it's this constant play between sort of the good and the bad, with Merlin having these powers and trying to make good through Arthur, but Arthur is tempted and has the bad. And one, it's more interested in this whole conception thing. The King Arthur part of it is rather slimly done. And two, the ultimate message seems to be that good and evil cancel each other out, and that in the end you just have muddled humanity, which, you know, I'd agree as a message, but as a story, it's rather flat. Merlin has these high wishes that he embodies in Arthur, and of course, if you tell the whole of the Arthur story, it's a tragedy. It's a story about a man who tries to make this golden era. It lasts for a little bit and then is undone by, you know, blood feuds and the fact he slept with his sister, and the questing beast, and, you know, Lancelot and Guinevere and all this kind of stuff. And so Nye takes this and he makes it so that that's the point, that good always undoes the bad and the bad always undoes the good, and in the end you're just left with a muddle, and that's it. And so it wasn't satisfying as the one about Falstaff. It hasn't got that bigness, it hasn't got that magnanimity. It's kind of small and hedging, I suppose. And yeah, he has this very sort of, I see it as a very 70s sensibility of, or let's put dirty sex jokes and stuff in there as well, which can be funny, can be shocking, but quite dated in not even in the, oh, we wouldn't say that anymore, just dated in the, oh, that's a bit tired now. But still, I had another one of his and I thought I might as well read it, so I read Robert Nye's Faust, and a lot like the Merlin, like enjoyable, but Falstaff, I like that one so much that it feels like, oh, he's never gonna produce something as good as that. Well, he's never gonna produce anything now, he's dead, but yeah, at the time, And so Faust is a retelling of the Faust myth. It's retold by his servant Wagner. It borrows bits from the Goethe story, and it borrows bits from Marlowe and things like this. And like the Merlin, it slathers it all in sort of sex jokes and scatology and stuff, which is why it gets that Rabelaisian sort of label. But it doesn't have the bigness and the magnanimity that pull it off. You can only slather your book in sex jokes if that is one part of a big yes, embrace life. If you just sort of have it in there with these sort of smaller, more wheedly, mincy characters, it doesn't have the big yes. It comes across as a bit icky. And Faust is icky in this. He doesn't wash, he smells. He's not a very pleasant person. Wagner is his servant, and he was interesting because he starts off being really interested in angels as a sort of a monk, and then he drifts into Faust's service. Helen of Troy is now just Helen, who is probably a prostitute, might be a man. There was a very confusing scene where she was stripped and may have had a penis, though I'm not sure if it was trying to say that she actually was Wagner and Wagner was her. It got a bit wobbly at that point. And then Wagner has these 6 or 7, I can't remember now, certain amount of young women who Faust presents to him, and they all have different sexual gifts. And this is where we get what's the woman Marguerite, who also goes by the name of, it's not Gertrude, it's gonna go, she has 2 names, and in another telling of Faust that I've read, she's kind of Faust's big love interest, but in this she's sort of concubine essentially to Wagner. And they decide to go to Rome because Faust's made a new deal, and the new deal is this: hey, will you give me another 28 more years on Earth with my own soul and magic powers and things if I go kill the Pope for you? And so they're going to Rome to kill the Pope. And he has a very elaborate plan about poisoned hosts and all this kind of thing. And the deal is, if he doesn't kill the Pope, then he himself will be sent to hell. And so most of it is this anti-pilgrimage to Rome. And it's almost like a Heart of Darkness thing. Things get weirder and less solid as they go along. And the travelling group whittles down through very unlikely and unusual ways. Like one just disappears, one falls down a hole, you know. There's this bit where they go to this monastery, and the monastery is very peculiar. There are lots of paintings of men in drag having sex with people on the wall, which was painted by a painter known as the Sodomite. And I looked it up. This monastery exists, these paintings exist, and the artist known as the Sodomite exists. But in this, there's this sort of marriage scene between Faust and Helen, and then Helen gets stripped and has a penis, and then is never seen again. Really not quite sure what was going on in that bit. As they get closer to Rome, even the very ground gives way and becomes this bog. And so everything gets a bit strange and wobbly. And Wagner's sort of a rationalist, and all these irrational things keep happening. And then they get to the killing of the Pope, and the Pope doesn't die. And Wagner is so annoyed about this, he kills Faust. And thus fulfills the prophecy that Faust will die and be taken to hell. And also that Wagner is the embodiment of the deal somehow. Maybe I could read it again and get some of the ins and outs a bit clearer. It did become unclear. I think it was unclear on purpose because it was sort of this voyage into darkness. I think the gist of it was that Wagner, Helen, and all the girls were not real, or they were manifestations of the deal. So they all merged into each other. I'm not totally sure. Yeah, I enjoyed it more than Merlin. Just the Faust myth fits better to the tone than Merlin did. I enjoyed Wagner as a character. I enjoyed the confusion, to be honest. But again, it's... if you put this sort of style with what feels small-minded, it doesn't quite work for me. then we came to the book that I've been planning. It's in here. This is Complete Works of Chaucer in Middle English. I ummed and ahed for ages whether to go with the Middle English or the Coghill. And I decided in the end to go for the Middle English. And I'm glad I did in the end. Because you do get acclimatized to it quite quickly. Even if, like, and you see the word femininity spelt with 3 Y's, but, you know, and of course the famous opening lines of the general prologue, when that April with his showers sought, the draught of marsh have pierced to the root. Whereas, you know, it's April, no showers though, dry month, rain all the way up to, but, so I thought April, time to read Canterbury Tales. I hadn't read it before, and I started this about the same time as I laid the turf, and so watering the garden again and again for a long time. I had it on my Kindle so I could read it, and so I was there at 6 a.m, was watching the sun come up, having a cup of coffee, watering the garden and reading Chaucer, and it was kind of glorious actually. It was really quite pleasant. I very much enjoyed it. One of the odd things is, so this version I've got is, I imagine it's the 1950s publication. It doesn't say anywhere, of the FN Landon Oxford University Press poetical works Chaucer, and he uses the Victorian ordering, but my Kindle used a more modern ordering. And what happened was I got to the end of, I can't remember which one it was now. It was the one before the Shipman's Tale, the Pardoner's Tale, I think. And no, it wasn't the one before the Shipman's Tale. I can't remember where I got to. I got to one, and the shipman interrupts. And it was really clear that the Shipman's Tale should be next. But in this edition it wasn't, but in my Kindle it was. So I followed my Kindle order, which I think is also the order that Coghill goes with. So yeah, so I was reading it in the Kindle, following the Kindle order, so flipping backwards and forwards through this to find the different tales, and then checking it sometimes against the Coghill just to check I got the meaning of it, because, you know, sometimes it does get a little difficult. Chaucer, what can I say? I mean, the best part of it is the frame. It's, go away, buzzy bee. Look, I'm planting beautiful things for you in my garden, but not here. You know, this is inside. Anyway, sorry. Chaucer, Pilgrims. It's the frame story, that's the best bit. The general prologue's very famous for introducing them all, and the little details. He is really good at telling detail that tells you about who, you know. This is the nun, and the nun is actually fancies herself as a bit of a gentlewoman. She speaks a beautiful form of French that no one in France speaks, because she learnt it in Deptford. She learnt it somewhere in London. She speaks English French, not French. Or, you know, you've got the cook who's so drunk, he falls off his horse a couple of times and he doesn't even finish his story. And this frame is great, because in between the stories, you've got characters who go, you got a story about that? I can one-up you one about that. Here, listen to my story about 2 men and a woman. Or, you've taken the piss out of carpenters in your story. I was a carpenter. Here's one about millers. It's the summoner and the friar who hate each other so much that the summoner's story is, there was this friar and he was a right twat. And then the friar's story is, there was this summoner and he just loves the devil. And so they're doing that. And that's what made it brilliant, because not only around the stories they're all competing, the stories themselves then have a bit more weight, because each story is representative of the person telling it. And so they have more to them than just a story. And then he's very, very good at getting into voices. And so the Wife of Bath story is quite a famous one, and her prologue, actually, where she talks about her husband she's had and all this. And then the Wife of Bath story is all about this knight, and he raped someone, actually, and he's sentenced to death. But he won't be killed if he says what a woman wants. And he goes around and asks, and then finally this very ugly woman says, say sovereignty. She wants power over her own self. That's what she wants. And he goes and he says that, and in response he then has to marry this ugly old woman. And he says, I don't want to marry the ugly old woman. You seem kind of magic. could you make yourself beautiful, please? And she goes, well, I can do one or two things. I can make myself very, very beautiful and completely unfaithful, or I can stay ugly and be completely faithful. Which do you choose? And he goes, I don't know, you pick. And because he's given her the sovereignty, she goes, I'll be both. But it's sort of been said that this can be sort of a feminist thing. There's a definite, because there's a number of the stories which are part of misogynist literature, and then there's a number of stories which are against it. And I don't think you can reflect Chaucer in any of this. What you're really reflecting is that Chaucer is really good at embodying his characters. So yes, this is the sort of story the wife of Bath would tell, whereas someone else would tell a completely different story. And I can't quite remember who tells what story now. I remember the stories, I remember the characters, I can't quite... There was one person who told this horrible story about this man who keeps testing his wife by stealing her children and saying he's killed them. And she just meekly goes along with it. And you got that versus the, all women want sovereignty. And it's fascinating. And so the icky story, the dirty stories, the naughty stories, pokers being shoved up arses, lots of farts, all of this. Then there are the more highbrow stories. You got ones like The Knight's Tale, which is a courtly tale of two men who love the same woman. And then the miller comes in and goes, I've got one of those. And it's that, but with arses and pokers and things. You got lots of stories of tricks and this sort of thing. There's always this element of class and people trying to play different classes. One of the stories that dated, I mean, this book's 14th century. One of the stories that's dated is The Nun's Tale. So she's this very genteel, her main thing is politeness and being seen as very put together. And her story, is sentimental and sweet and about children, and it's pious, and it reflects everything she wants to put across. It is also a case of anti-Jewish blood libel, all about these Jewish people who kill someone, and the Virgin Mary grants his dead body the ability to keep singing so that these horrible Jewish people are found out and killed. And it's the fact that when Chaucer's putting it in her mouth, it's clear that it's represented thus as a tasteful story and a very sort of pious story. But now, of course, very untasteful. But yeah, and it's fascinating. I mean, I want to use the word eek instead of also. He loves that. I love grutchen, meaning grouchy, groaning. Oh, stop your grutching. I love that. You start reading like this, it kind of comes off like that. There's another one of the books, one of the first stories, where he does a northern accent for the characters. So it gets even odder what you're trying to read, and you're like, oh, I've got to flip that. There's this fascinating way in which the Christian, the Roman, the Greek all merge together. So you have Greek gods with Roman names fulfilling Christian functions and all this kind of stuff. And then fairy comes in there as well. This very layered imaginary world, which I like. He loves a bit of Seneca. He's always quoting Seneca. He also loves Boethius, but he did translate Boethius. I've got that in here. I also have Boethius translated into modern English, so I can choose. And as for the Old English, I wondered, because when I was going backwards and forwards, do I go the modern English or the Old English? I was like, well, I probably can read the Old English, but why? Will I lose something? There's something about reading it in the words it was written, and still being able to read it in the words it's written all these hundreds of years later. That there's something good about that. I like that. And he's often, he's brilliant. I really liked Chaucer. I love the fact that he's a character in it, and he gives himself two of the worst stories. And the joke is, famous storyteller Chaucer can't tell a story. And so he gets Tell us a Topaz, which is this sort of rhyming ditty thing, which gets ended early because they were like, this is rubbish, tell something else. And there's something else he tells. It's called the Tale of Melody. And the Tale of Melody is cut out of the modern translation because it's so boring. It's quite long. It's about a husband and wife, and their daughter's been attacked, and the husband really just wants to kill the people who attacked her, and the wife is urging for clemency, and that, you know, if he goes and attacks them, it will just start this whole feud, and then nothing will ever get sorted. You know, Jesus recommends turn the other cheek. This is the time to do it. And they argue with each other, citing classical sources, religious sources, folk sources, and that's all it is. It's this argument, and it goes on and on and on. I love the way Chaucer said, right, yeah, no, I can't tell a tale. When he's telling all these lovely, really interesting tales, and some less interesting ones, it's a really good book. And the way the frame story and the way he embodies the voices just adds to every story. So, you know, if it was just the stories, it'd be okay. You know, there's some good stories in there, but the frame story just lifts it up so much. And then we get to the last one, which is the Parson's Tale, which isn't a tale. It's this is, you know, small print, very closely typed, double heading of 40 pages, an essay about the 7 deadly sins. And I have to say, thus it ends on a bit of a flat note, but it seems to be the note that Chaucer was happy to end on. In some ways, this isn't finished. Like the original plan that he cites at the beginning is there's going to be 124 tales, so you're going to tell 4 tales each, and that certainly never happens. But it seems like he's happy with this one to be the last one at the very least, because he has a little footnotey bit at the end where he talks about all the works he's written so far, and this must be one of his last ones, and he recommends himself to God and the audience, and that's his end for that. And yeah, Chaucer. It was a bit of work, you know. It took, 2.5 weeks? It's essentially 350 pages. I mean, it wasn't slick and easy, but it wasn't as hard as all that. And doing it in the beautiful April morning sunshine, watering my grass and watching it get lusher, there's just something nice about it. It was just a pleasant experience. I really enjoyed it. So I thought I'd finish off the month. Before I finished that, of course, I got cast in the play, The Unfriend by Stephen Moffat. Stephen Moffat, I used to watch Coupling back in the day. I enjoyed a lot of his Doctor Who. I saw a couple of episodes of Chalk, which it's all right, I guess. So Stephen Moffat, comedy writer, TV writer, his first play. It was directed by Mark Gatiss. Reece Shearsmith was the original main person in it. It's about a middle-class English couple who, you know, when you're on holiday and you go, oh yeah, we should meet up. Well, the person they said that to was an American. So of course they've taken them up on the offer, and she's come round. And they found out that she has a string of murders linked to her name. Not definitely proved, just linked. And they're like, oh, how can we have a murderer in the house? And they get more and more nervous. She's there, she's with the children, but she has this sort of almost Mary Poppins-y, it's even referenced in the play, Mary Poppins, effect of making their household nicer and making them happier. Yeah, she still might be a murderer. And that's the play. I come in as a policeman. Most of my stuff is a big toilet gag. I've never seen it. We haven't rehearsed it yet. I don't know how it's going to go with an audience or anything like that. I've merely read the play, and I found it quite funny. There you go. I found it quite funny. I think it's going to date. I don't think, I think we're on the edge of its performability. Once Trump's not president, there's quite a lot of Trump stuff in there. I don't know. It's quite funny. I hope it's going to be very enjoyable to be in, and I hope the audience are going to enjoy it, and I think they will. Yeah. So, getting near the end of the month, I thought, well, let's read a couple of children's books to, well, I'll say pad the numbers, not really pad the numbers, because if they're good books, they're good books. And the first one was a good book. This is Black Harvest. It's by Anne Pilling. I picked it up from a charity shop in London. along with a bunch of other children's books I've now read, but I hadn't got around to this one. It's about a family, and they go to Ireland, and the dad has a job in Dublin, and they stay in a house in the west of Ireland, which is a brand new bungalow. There's something wrong. There's this bad smell. They get really hot. They feel tired and weak and hungry and just sick all the time. And the food just rots. All the food they have. They get the milk out of the fridge and it's turned into jelly in a few hours. The bread goes rotten. The potatoes go rotten. Everything's sort of manky and there's this oppression to it. And the girl, she starts having these nightmares. She sees this skeletal figure going around on these gloopy fields, picking up mud and eating it and vomiting. And then it gets worse. These visions start sort of coming into her daily life. That she sees these two haggard, almost owl-like children who scratch her. She's at the shop and the skeletal woman comes in, dumps something on the table, says it's all I've got to pay her, grabs bread and goes. And she opens it and it's a dead baby. And what's more, their baby sister's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And one of the children, Oliver, he's building a den, but he seems to know, he's not succumbing to this sickness. He seems to know something. Spoilers. It's the ghosts of the Irish famine. This bungalow is essentially where some people who starved of the famine have washed up, their bones have been. And that's where he's digging his den. And there's this very grim scene where the water pours in the hole and the bones from the skeleton come up. And it's a really creepy book. It's a children's book, but it's one of the creepiest books I have read for quite some time. And one of the reasons it's creepy is because it's a real horror. You know, the Irish famine was a real thing. Terrible things happened. There was, people starved to death. There was cannibalism. There was all sorts of, reports of cannibalism. There's all sorts of terrible, horrible things. They really happened. And here they're revisited as ghosts, and they've got to be put to rest. And that's the story. It is gripping. I read it in a day. It's just viscerally nasty. But in a way that doesn't feel like it's just going, oh, I'm being nasty, but because it's saying something. It's saying, look, these were real horrors that happened. Yeah, it's very good. The next is a very different kind of children's book. It's called The Letter for the King by Tonke Dragt. It's a classic in Holland, regarded up there with Lord of the Rings and Narnia and such. And I read it in translation, of course. It's good, but it's very straight lines. It's very clear, it's very crisp, it's very simple. The bad people come from an evil land called Evil Land. Some of the bad people pretend to be good people, but they quickly admit, no, I'm a bad person. Why haven't you spotted I'm a bad person? The good people are good people. Even the journey, so there's a map of the journey. So he's got to take a letter from one king, from one land to another, to give it to the king. There's the journey, and it's a straight line from one to the other. Even the journey is a straight line. There's no, it's all about friendship and chivalry, and there's no questioning of any of this. Chivalry is chivalry, and it is good. And good people do good things and bad people do bad things, and sometimes things get in the way of good people when they're trying to make their journey, but there's always some other good people to help them out. I won't even say at the last minute, a few steps before the last minute frequently. And so it's quite, I don't know, is it simplistic? I don't know, but it is simple. It's clear, crisp, straight lines. There's a purity to it. And so you're reading it and you're thinking, this should be quite cringeworthy. But the earnestness of it and the simplicity of it and the just, we're telling this story, this is a story, here are the characters, this guy you like, this guy you don't like, this guy's pretending to be another guy, and it's all laid out for you. And as such, it's a very easy read, it's a very pleasant read. But it's it's not a book with depths, I don't think. Maybe there are loads, maybe I've missed them all. but it feels like it's exactly what it says it is. And sometimes that's a nice thing. That's a good thing. Sometimes you want a nice, clear, crisp, straight line, enjoyable story, and that's what that was. I can see why it's a classic for that reason. Though, when the baddies are from evil land and they wear black and red and they are evil, it doesn't ask you to do a great deal. The best bit was where they go to this town, and the town's essentially called Dangria, I think, or it's essentially Danger Town. And they go to Danger Town, and a stranger says, "Oh, I wouldn't go into the Lord Mayor's house if I were you." But they go into the Lord Mayor's house, and he tries to trap them in there. And things ensue. That was probably the most sort of gripping bit, I suppose. Though it was very signalled. And you already know they got friends there who can help. So, yeah. There you go. Letter for the King. Simple, crisp, classic. Yeah. So that was my April. And I enjoyed it very much. I mean, I don't know how well I described Chaucer. I think part of the reason I haven't described it very well is because I haven't written it up yet. And I always talk about a book better after I've written it up. So if it was a little bit smurshy-worshy, higgledy-piggledy, then that's why. Because I haven't written it up, so it's not crystallised into the good shapes. Though those shapes are going to be along the lines of his brilliancy at voicing a character and contrasting the voices and sort of acts of ventriloquism and embodying and imaginative sort of, I suppose, empathy. And that's going to be the gist of it in the end. So I just got distracted because someone outside yelling at each other. So I don't actually know what I plan to read in May. I know what I'm reading right now, but after that, I'm not sure. But we've got bank holiday coming, and it looks like the sun's going to be around a little bit longer. Maybe some rain at the weekend. I don't know. So I'm going to go and have some fun. I'm going to go and relax and enjoy the sunshine. Have a lovely one. Oh, with my garden. Yeah.